please feel free to add your name, organization, and your location and pronouns, anything you want to share about your identity to the chat. I'm really excited to have you all here with us today. We had over, I think, 70 registrants, so we'll see who arrives. And if you had folks that wanted to get access to the content today or the conversation, just a reminder, we will send out a recording afterwards. My name is Alyssa Wright. I have the great gift and honor of being the steward of Wright Collective. We're a community of consultants who are driven to mobilize resources for social change. And I'm really thrilled today to share with you something that I am hoping sparks further conversation for you within your organization about how you're showing up as a fundraising entity right now. But also, I hope that it also gives you some, little golden nuggets of wisdoms and insights into where money is moving, given the current moment that we're in. So I'm excited to share with you from our projects right now. We've got about 20 or 24 projects, 20 or 25 projects running across our portfolio at Wright Collective, from capital campaigns to annual development plans to galas and events and scaling up major gift programs. And we're just learning a whole heck of a lot. And so, what we're learning in real time, I want to share with you all today. The other thing that I always like to share with folks, if this is your first time getting a chance to be in community with us and hear a little bit from me, is that I have fundraised through many a crisis. So, my career started during the first recession, nothing like in 2008 being handed with doubling the budget of a small theater company. That was a good time. And then I've had the great, again, gift and opportunity to travel and work with international organizations. So I got to work in Eastern Europe early in my career, fundraising for peace building and peacekeeping work there. I got the opportunity to live in East Africa and work with a variety of different East African NGOs through a lot of political unrest and unstable economic circumstances there. And I've also been able to work with this team, Sarah from my team, who is here today, and many others throughout the first Trump administration and the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've sort of run the gamut of being in these moments where things feel tumultuous and uncertain. And while I want to honor that this probably feels like a very different time for many of you, because I know many of your missions and the communities and populations that you serve, I also want to remind you and call you into that this is staying the course long term, right? So this is generational work. And we will stick with it and we will call out and call in those who can resource this in the climate. So I just want to set the tone and thank you all for being here. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and get us started. And just a reminder at the end of these, we always like to do some robust Q&A. So just know that that is coming. So today's topic is unlocking abundance in an era of extremes. I don't know how many of you are feeling abundantly minded right now, but I also want to share that abundance doesn't just mean financial, fundraising, money coming in the door. I have been, I don't know about you all, but I've been really kind of taken aback in a wonderful way by the small acts of generosity that my own team, my friends and family, my colleagues in this field have bestowed upon me. And I also see that as abundance, that heart capital, that wisdom capital, that spiritual capital that's kind of keeping me afloat right now, with the many missions that we serve at the collective. So I just want to welcome in this idea that while today we will talk about fundraising, I don't want you to ever forget the power of especially the relationships that you have. Community is everything. And so I just want to be mindful today as we go through this that, the goal for you between now and the end of the year or now in the next 30 days, whatever you're sort of framing today's content around for yourself, might also be a social goal on just making sure that you connect to certain people, and making sure that you bring the relationships into your work that will outlive and outlast this moment. So we'll focus on that today. We really like to emphasize taking that more polycapital style of approach, just because fundraising so often just focuses on the financial components of it, and we sort of refuse to be transactional. Just doesn't work. So let me move into today's conversation. I love Proverbs, and I felt like this one came across my path. Actually, I totally stole this from another client who shared it in an opener last week. And so the things that I wanted to kind of highlight today as you think about ways that you might be modifying or updating your development program or plans into the coming weeks and months is that I really want you to remember that it is important right now that we stay dedicated and committed to community, that we show up in the conversations and the relationships that we all have, representing them in a dignified and very clear way, and that we stay the course. Because I feel like right now I am seeing a lot of folks who aren't maybe doing the things that they would normally do at this time of year because they're either frozen or they're trying to make pivots that maybe aren't necessary yet, right? So it's really important in this landscape that you obviously address the things that are coming at you. You be prepared when you hear about, we heard on, I think it was on Monday, Sarah, that a foundation is sunsetting at the end of June that three of our clients applied for five-figure gifts from. So yeah, the landscape is kind of rocky. We're like, oh great, we don't know where we're gonna find that, but let's figure it out. So I just want to name that it's important for you, and I know many of you again on today's call are very dedicated to the work that you do, but I just feel like it's an important reminder of we're working on the next decade of what is possible for the communities that we take care of, and the people and the missions that we love. And so I don't want you to get out of the heartbeat of your programs or your development culture and what you already do and how you invite people to give, just because we are in an uncertain time. So, all of you probably know this from other trainings if you've done them with me, but my Excel sheets are really ugly. I'm not very good at graphic design and one pagers, but that's because I spend a lot of time with donors. So I name that because I think that it's really important, especially in these times that we're in. You know, some of those more technical, administrative things that you're doing. While I want to honor that they're really important, maybe right now is not the time for you to do a rebrand of your organization or to do a full, launch your first CRM or think about more of those like development infrastructure pieces. Right now is the time to spend time with donors. And there's two reasons for that. One is I have heard that from a lot of funders that they're kind of taking one of two approaches, and I'm sure many of you might find these sort of extremes, again, this era of extremes, frustrating to hear, and it could also be your own experience, but there's kind of a pocket of funders that are frozen. They are in a wait and see. They're not doing anything. They're not unleashing any new capital. They're not necessarily even putting out their grant cycle and when deadlines are going to be for the fall. They're not necessarily like strategic planning or reimagining what they're doing, but they're in a total wait and see. And they're a little frozen by the moment because they're not sure what's coming and they're not sure how they're going to want to show up. And that's kind of one bucket. The other bucket of funders and donors, and what I've heard is that they are making it rain right now and trying to do as much as possible and reaching out to their grantees to say, what do you need? How can we help you? I'll share some examples today of institutional foundations and some individual family funds that we've heard are increasing their payouts to 20, 25, 30% when the standard for a foundation is 5. And so I just want to name that because I also think that outside of the big funders, I'm working with a client on getting 100 new donors in their spring campaign. And the lowest gift that they can give is $5. And we've already signed on 37 people with about 10 emails and a bunch of phone calls and text messages. So I just want to honor that we're in a time where I think that we're seeing these extremes in donor behavior. We're seeing some that are totally frozen, waiting and holding back, not sure what they're going to do. And for those relationships, I want to honor that in many ways. Like, I think even in my own household, like we're a little frozen. We're like, what's going to be the right thing to give to at the right moment? What do we need to do in the next 5 minutes? What might we need to do in the next 5 months? So I do think that's a natural sort of feeling right now. And so I do think for those people, it's going to be really important that you all are mapping when you should talk to them next. So I always bring up in a lot of our training specificity, super important. If a donor says to you, yeah, why don't we touch base in the fall? I don't want you to forget about them until the day after Thanksgiving or December 1st and then reach back out and say, oh yeah, you said to circle back in the fall. How you doing? Can you make a gift this year? Be really clear in your funder conversations if they're taking the wait and see approach. You want to say to them, hey, you said to reach out in the fall. How about September 15th? Would it work if I reach out the week of September 15th and we go get a cup of coffee? Or better yet, does it work for you like right before the Halloween holiday if we just put in the calendar that we'll grab lunch one day at noon? Awesome. Thanks, Fred, or whomever. So I want to be really mindful of that type of mapping that sometimes I don't see organizations do. And then all of a sudden, time goes by quickly. You're in your programs, you're dealing with some of the volatility and everything within your communities and your mission making. So just be really clear when you're mapping that you get specific follow up or put things on the calendar for the fall right now. So, one of the ways to sort of again, to get back to our topic today, to unlock abundance is to do this type of mapping and to not go away. As everyone knows, one of my like catchphrases is that I'm lovingly annoying. I don't disappear. I keep knocking on the door and I give you stickers and high fives and tell you how much we need you to help us keep moving forward. But it's really important that you keep beating that drum unless somebody's a clear no. But if somebody says, hey, touch base with us in the fall, awesome. How about, the first week of September? The other bucket of folks that I talked about who are really making it rain right now, I wouldn't be afraid to ask them for. Sometimes I get asked what's an appropriate gift to ask for, a gift size to ask for. If you publicly have seen, or if you know anecdotally, that a funder you have right now is, let's say they're gonna, they're gonna do 20% or they want to give out some extra grants this year, and they give you $10,000 a year right now. I see a lot of organizations do this sort of 20% increase mentality, or, oh, we'll just ask for 5 grand more. I want to invite you in this landscape to go back to the $10,000 funder and say, what we really need to get through the rest of the year because it's uncertain is 20 or $30,000 in a gift. Don't think of small incremental giving right now because even if you ask for 30, they might just come back and say, okay, well, if 30 is really what you need, no other organizations asked us for that much. So we'd love to pass it on to you. I've had that scenario happen in the last couple of months. I've also had the situation where, again, they kind of pull back and say, well, we gave you 10 last year and we're not increasing a ton, but does 15 work? Awesome. So if you had only asked for 12 or 13,000, you would have gotten less than you actually asked for. So it's just really important, I think, to speak from a place of abundance and a place of real need. We'll talk a little bit more about that on that slide. So I share this with you today and I put this quote up here from a call that I had on Thursday with a donor who gives like five and $10,000 gifts to organizations throughout Massachusetts and a couple in southern New Hampshire because he literally said to me, I am so surprised in the last few months that these organizations that I give $10,000 to haven't reached out to me at all. It's been crickets. I haven't seen them put newsletters out. They've been doing their sort of like standard status quo social media posting. And then I've talked to the ED who seems very, nervous and anxious about a lot of things, but still, I am so surprised that I haven't heard anything from the development team of what they need, what their funding potential gaps are. Um, and so I think it's really important if you leave with one takeaway today on how to unlock abundance, you should be having, if not one, I'd say up to 3 or 4 funder meetings a week. And it doesn't mean existing funders. It just means people who are working in the philanthropy, business, financial, community kind of spaces where they have access to these resources or knowledge about how they're going to flow. Because I guarantee you in this landscape, which we're already seeing, money's going to pivot on a dime. We're going to find out that things were unfrozen. People are deciding to just launch a grant making round next week. A giving circle has tripled the amount that it's raised and it's giving out 5 extra grants to the community. So it's really important that I think you're connecting with your donors and especially with, folks who have a little bit more potential to give. In the current landscape, they will continue to accrue wealth. That's the moment that we're in with income inequality, and what we're going to see is the divide into the coming months. And so I do think it's important, while the market has ups and downs, that you also acknowledge that those folks, those family philanthropies, those individuals, some of those foundations will have more potential to give, or they're already going to be giving more because they've mandated it. So spend time with donors, and not just with donors, but also with donor advisors, program officers at your local community foundation, at your current grant makers, and other community leaders. I know a lot of our clients have been reaching out to their like local state reps or their select boards or their rotaries or their chamber of commerces. Just touch base with sort of everybody in that space because you don't know if maybe, lawyers are very busy in this landscape. I've heard from several law firms that they're actually, thinking about what they might want to do philanthropically for the first time this year or beyond pro bono work. So I think it's really important that you're reaching out to all of those entities and touching base with them. I want to honor that again. I know that you all I'm sure have very busy schedules. But I want you to find those things like I gave my, sort of very sad updating the Excel sheet example earlier. I want you to find those things that maybe you can table to the next month or the next week to make spaciousness for you to have an hour or two every week where you're booking a meeting with some of these folks that are connected to resources. I also think you should always follow the momentum. Um, so I feel like it's really important. I'm seeing several of you on the call today that I've gotten the gift of actually fundraising with, or I'm fundraising with right now. And I think that one of the things that's really important is that you follow the momentum. You pay attention to people who are in that reciprocal relationship with you of let's do this together, let's make this thing happen. What do you need? Here's how we can help. Um, Stay in touch with them ongoing, right? Don't chase after folks that aren't engaging with you or who I always say three strikes, you're out, three emails, and I don't follow up again. Three phone calls, I don't follow up again. But if someone is emailing me every week or every couple of days, or I'm seeing them in a lot of community events, I'll foster that relationship just to keep seeing what's possible. So spend time with donors and follow the momentum in this landscape. And then this is actually something that one of my mentors said to me about 15 years ago now when we were on the Upper West Side of Manhattan with our little portfolio packets, walking up and down the street, having all of a bunch of meetings with some of the families that we were fundraising for, fundraising from in the city. Um, I'll never forget, she said to me, the market has always had ups and downs, but there will always be people who have more than they need. And so we are living in a time where I think a lot of people are saying, what's enough? They're questioning the enoughness question. And I have actually seen a lot of folks who, are kind of launching their legacy plans or their planned giving ideas of what they wanted to do in retirement earlier to meet the need. So, again, if you have donors who are 55 and over, who maybe have, retired and might have the question, and you might have the question in your mind of, I'm pretty sure we're in their will, but I wonder if there's a chance right now to have a conversation with them about helping us fill the gap by giving during this time or during this window. I think that's really important, especially of maybe some of your more major funders or partners that you have who have more capacity to give. Everything I've heard from colleagues in the um, colleagues in the tax and accounting world has also said that upper middle class and high net worth folks are probably going to get more tax breaks in this landscape going into the rest of the year. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that. And we actually got to do, Sarah and I got to do this great workshop with the Summers Foundation up here in York County 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that we talked about in that was we actually researched for the workshop every city and the median income for the different locations to see where they might want to target or host their fundraising event this summer to target higher net worth seasonal residents. So it's really important, I think, to know the landscape economically, where wealth is being accrued or where there's a density of those types of folks as you design your events and mechanisms, if you're really looking for more major donor relationships to fill your gaps into the rest of the year. I also think it's really important in this landscape, again, in the spirit of unlocking abundance, to know where you're going to have those community events where there is a high number of people socially hanging out, networking, having a good time. So you can grab those 100 or 200 $5 donors at the brewery or at the farmer's market on the weekends. So I want to honor that, it's important for us to raise big amounts of capital because you can't fill a $500,000 or $200,000 funding gap with $5 at a time, but you can continue to build a base and base build in this moment, which again kind of goes back to what we referenced at the top, which is that the social capital and your relationships are going to be just as important to the financial need. Because you also never know who that $5 donor is, right? I know we've all probably been surprised by someone who comes in at a lower level or lower participation and then shows up with a bigger gift. So stick to the facts in your messaging. So I've been to, oh geez, I just went to my fourth or fifth gala so far already. Like I'm already in flats. I tried heels for the first one and now I'm just like in flats in a pantsuit. I'm done. So I know it's gala season for many of you and you're having many events. What I've noticed at these events is that the remarks have sort of been across the continuum of talking about what the exact need is and what the projected need is. I haven't actually like seen this clear, concise definition, but I've heard it from some folks like in their funder meetings of right now, we actually have funds that were frozen. We actually are facing $1 million loss for purchasing food in the state of New Hampshire or whatever it might be.
I've heard those exact needs. And then also, again, we're living in a time where there's a lot of chaotic messaging. I've heard folks sort of articulate and say, there's a chance if SNAP benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, if these programs go away, here's the ways in which we would have to pivot and what the possibilities would be around what we would need funding for or how we'd need to realign. So I just want to name that I think it's really important that you speak to the facts of the moment. You talk about what the possibility is, but you invite donors to give right now to what the needs are or to give a little extra so you can prepare for that coming potentially coming down the line. I think it's important to be clear on your timeframes. So I was in a funder meeting with a client a couple weeks ago, and one of the things they said to this particular foundation was along the lines of, well, it's going to be a need for the next couple of years. And I was like, uh-oh, like, I know that sometimes when I've heard those things on the philanthropy side in meetings, I'm like, oh, shoot, they don't actually really have a plan for what's happening in the next, 30 days or what's happening between now and the end of the year and how they're going to stick to that strategic plan or vision. So be clear on the elements of your strategic plan or your strategic vision that you're working on that you can stick to, but funders get really confused when they hear vague timelines, or it gives them a feeling like there's no real sense of trust of here's what we're facing right now, here's what we could be facing in the next couple of months. But regardless of all of that, we're still going to be able to do A, B, C, and D by the end of the calendar year. E, F, and G are the things that we're concerned about. So be clear on your timeframes, really get that messaging down and practice it. That's the other thing is one of the things that, Sarah and I do as coaches with a lot of our clients. We literally have like 45-minute, hour-long calls where we just say, speak at us and practice it. We want to hear you emphasize the points and go back time and time again to like making it really clear because everyone else is also in an era of getting a lot of information, right? Um, so it's really important that when folks leave that funder meeting with you, that program officer, that family board member, that trustee, that individual donor, they leave remembering the two or three things that you reiterated a couple of times. Because I guarantee if they're anything like many of us, they're going into some kind of caregiving role for the rest of the day or the week. They're popping into another meeting about something else that's kind of extreme or emotional. And so it's important that you're really clear on those things. You pop those points out in those funder calls. Be prepared to pivot your messaging this year ongoing. I would say if you don't have standing calls with your director of communications or your communications team, even if it's a 15-minute call every week, be clear on how you need to pivot your messaging. It's really important to stay relevant and not put out anything that's stale. Because again, I've had some donors reach out to me and say, like, didn't they put that out a couple months ago? And aren't they impacted by this other thing that's going on? Right now. So just again, be aware that folks are really listening and paying attention right now to some of your messaging because they see you as the people in the community or around the issue area that you're tackling as a leader, and they look to you to advise them on their giving and their activism. Know your role in organizing advocacy and policy this year. I have to say it was pretty incredible to see everyone from like an animal welfare group all the way through to a local health clinic all marching in the pride parade at a pride parade recently in my feed on social media. I saw folks just really clear on organizing to support the LGBTQ community. And also seeing folks again just going to the state house advocating for the cuts to education and healthcare. So know your role in organizing advocacy and policy and be clear on what you're going to do. And if you haven't had this board level conversation, I think it's really important because a lot of donors also too are politically charged right now giving to that space, and they're going to want to know how you're organizing around particular topics because they're giving philanthropically and politically in the same lane, which is really good to see. The last thing is it's really important, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, but to just practice your conversations, read your own newsletters as if you were the person receiving them. Put your donor hat on a lot this year and say, would I give to this newsletter? Would I actually read this read this e-blast to the end? How would this social media post resonate with me? It's really important that you are being clear, concise, and being really honest and transparent. So I had a lot of organizations during the COVID-19 pandemic in the first couple months of that year who reached out to donors and said, actually, you know what?
we can't do our program in this current landscape. Everything is shut down, but we'd like you to keep giving to us because we are going to supply basic healthcare needs, food and supplies, cash handouts. They were doing some like, distributions to families in their community. They said, we're totally changing right now to be like a social service organization because we can't run our programs. All the organizations I knew that did that, but had to pause their programming, retained those donors through that window because they weren't doing it in a silo. They were really clear on how they needed to make those pivots. So stick to the facts in your messaging and just again, if you don't have those talking points, please do, reach out with an email after today and let Sarah or I or other members of our team know what you're trying to make more concise right now, or maybe you are sharing something in a way where again it feels like a more of a like grant application or something, that's more wordy or lengthy. We want you to be able to really be in the grocery store aisle at the town meeting, giving a 5-minute speech at an event and knock it out of the park this year so people understand what you need. The next piece to start unlocking abundance is just engage donors really thoughtfully and efficiently. So, again, this is a very crowded, chaotic landscape. Make sure that you don't design an event or an activity or come up with an idea until you've checked in with people that they really want to do it. So, just be really clear on what people's bandwidth is. I have sat on the other side of I've, very many days sat in front of my laptop and, had the heartbreak of hoping that 100 people were going to buy tickets to our event, and we've sold 17. And so I just want you to be really mindful of before you do any activities or events, survey the donors, or even just reach out to a couple of them and say, "Are you going to come this year? Will you buy a ticket? Will you sponsor? We're thinking about doing this event in October." It's just really important that you make the time for a little bit of that prep because you'll save yourself a ton of energy and stress if the event or the activity or the engagement isn't well attended or successful. The other thing I think is important to note in that is that in the last couple of months, it's gone back to something that I think is really important, which is during these windows, donors will often say, I just need to know what you need right now and how much you need me to give, but I can't attend anything. Like, I don't want to participate in anything. So, during 2021, the year after the second wave of the COVID year, we had a lot of donors say to us, like, I loved actually that I didn't have to attend anything last year. I got your newsletter. I got to have a couple, a one on one conversation with you. And, I don't think we're going to go back to attending some of those events. So just be mindful where events sit in your strategic engagement with donors, and don't do anything that you don't have to do unnecessarily this year. You might raise more money doing a marathon of phone calls where you call all of your monthly donors and thank them, or you mail them all a sticker or a water bottle this year with a handwritten card. There might be other things that activities and things that are either more meaningful or they'd rather participate in. I think it's really important to keep a hopeful narrative as best as you can. Um, what I've learned working alongside the midwifery community and a lot of the birth justice circles that Right Collective does campaigning in, is that it's really important that we don't talk consistently about what isn't working, but what is working and the hopeful narrative of what is possible for these systems. Because right now, people think that they don't exist. And in that particular ecosystem, there are midwives all over the country in birth centers and homes and different hospitals who are catching. Healthy, happy babies with great outcomes, but we only hear about the maternal health crisis, in the forefront of it, and that there are no solutions or we can't come up with a solution. So you all know that the solutions exist. And so I think it's really important that in whatever way you can continue to keep a hopeful narrative that does stand out amongst the crowd right now to say, actually, things are working. They're working here, and we're not going to stop the heartbeat of that no matter what we face. So just be mindful of that you continue to inspire people to what's possible while also I want to honor the reality that you have to bring them of, we're down 1.7 million in money to feed seniors in our community. But it doesn't mean that we're going to stop on the trajectory of taking care of that population and combating the loneliness pandemic amongst them, right? So whatever those narratives are, try to keep carrying that forward as best you can. And then the last thing I would just say for some different donor engagement ideas, You've probably heard us share many times. We do a lot of virtual funder briefings or virtual community gatherings. We do little wisdom gatherings where we have people pop up around a different topic. We do storytelling hours. We kind of do them always around meal times at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We try to do those with clients where it's kind of a virtual community gathering. I also name that because I think that it might give the opportunity, if you are a place based organization, for folks that are regional or national to come and participate and learn more about your work. I have a donor who never really gave outside of Massachusetts and is now giving in 5 other states to refugee and immigrant services because of the landscape that we're in. So just remember that those virtual gatherings, they can be a light lift. You make a slide deck, you set up a Zoom link, you get a special guest to come and speak, and then you open it up to Q&A at the end. It doesn't have to be arduous or a heavy lift. It can be with things that you already have going. I think open houses for organizations that have a physical location, I've seen those being really successful. I do think that food is medicine and food is culture and food is joy. So if you do something like an open house and you just have the best new taco truck in town park out front, or you have it catered by the only Black women owned bakery in the area, something very values aligned for you. I've found that donors really like that opportunity to just stop by, have something great to snack on, connect with a couple of people, and walk out and leave. They're just showing their support and solidarity. They don't necessarily want to sit through a program right now, or they don't want to have to participate for hours on end because maybe they've only got 30 minutes to pop in and pop out. Um, the other thing I wanted to name is just a simple dinner party. So we've been doing some higher end ticket priced simple dinner parties to replace galas or larger scale events of that type. And I find that to be really effective. So again, if you have a group of a lot of donors that give it the thousand, $5,000, $10,000 level, it might be more intentional to just bring a small group together at a higher price point or with the expectation of giving a higher gift and really curate a meaningful experience for them in that way. I've also seen this done really well for people who sort of lead the charge with crowdfunding in the community. Um, so one of our clients has a sort of a group of young professionals that they do a dinner party for every year. And that dinner party is specifically because each of those young professionals crowdfunds over $5,000 a year on their storytelling pages. So again, you can find different mechanisms to honor these different constituencies during this time. And I will also say, as you move through this work, I think it is really important just to go back to that emphasis on relationships. So I think it's super important for you to remember that you never know who's watching, right? I think we've all been surprised by the anonymous check or the donor we didn't think could give anymore, or the person who knows so and so, and then all of a sudden you're, sitting across from someone with a family foundation or the head of a corporate giving program. So that actual dinner party that I just referenced, someone in that community actually had some family wealth that he didn't know about. And he got really excited to bring his parents and grandparents into the process of getting to know that organization. And now they're all donors to it. So, all these multi generational things, I think, also, too, are really good tactically for you this year because leverage the relationships that you have and really think about, are the younger generations and the older generations all at the table? Do I know their kids and grandkids? Do I know their parents and grandparents? So again, that's a great, I think, an important thing you could even be doing this year. Reaching out to and engaging the other generations of your existing funders in this work. And the last thing is just to have a fun event. So everyone is very stressed out. Right Collective has been talking a lot about this, and we're like, what kind of event would we want to go to? Because we're working in the landscape and we'd like to just do something fun and joyful and unique. So we're designing a retreat right now with an herbalist in the state of Maine because we just thought we would get together and learn how to make herbal tinctures and get some time to garden together and be out in nature. So think about fun events or things that you would want to be a part of and design. Meet people where they're at and with the activities that they love and that they want to be doing. All right. Got a couple more slides and then we'll just open it up to Q&A. So please do pepper the chat with questions that you have. And Sarah will sort of help me facilitate that conversation as we get to the last 15 minutes of today. Identifying the right funding sources. So first thing I want you to think about is who gave to you during other volatile times, right? So, who were the donors that in 2020, 2021 showed up for you? Who were the funders who maybe during leadership transitions? Did you have a leadership transition from founder to first generation ED, or from one development director to a new development director, or from board chair to a different board chair, a different iteration of the board? Whether it's been an internal time of volatility or there's been external volatility out in the world, in the community that you serve or the area that you live, who's shown up? And if you haven't talked to those people in the last like 30 days, talk to them now. So whoever showed up for you in those times, even if it's an entity that said we're not giving to you anymore, or if it's an individual who said, I'm done with my board service, but happy, reach out to them and say, hey, you were there for us during this other time. Right now, we're feeling the same thing. Could we just touch base on sort of strategies and ideas and, ask for that advice? And sometimes it does lead to resources. But I also think it's important to call those people in to acknowledge that you might really need to pull in the extra support this year. I also think that calling out and in high net worth donors and families is really important. Private philanthropy has the resources to give. You've probably seen a lot of our trainings and resources that we've put out over about the over $200 billion that exists in donor advised funds. And that's not even foundations and other structures. So just be mindful of, and again, actually, I had a call on Monday, yeah, on Monday with a philanthropic advisor who told me that a lot of the families that she is working with have basically come to her and said, we can do a lot privately this year, but the company is what we're worried about. So that's where I just want to honor and name that small businesses and corporate are struggling this year. I have seen every client for the last 2 or 3 months struggle to get sponsorship for their events. Brands are really struggling with the tariff situation and not knowing what's coming next. I've seen small businesses shutting down. Our local Japanese restaurant here in the town that I live is in a really stressful position. I had a conversation with him last night. So small businesses are struggling and corporate is struggling. And so this is going to be, I think, the tough pocket going into the rest of the year. Um, I also think that we've known that uh, the middle class and household giving have been hurting really since the pandemic and haven't bounced back very well. That being said, that's why we've all shifted to monthly giver and smaller level donor support. So again, don't miss out on the value of those 20 donors that can give $5 a month and then increasing it to 30 and then increasing it to 40. Make sure that your donation mechanisms are set up this year so you can accept 3, 5, $8 donations. A lot of organizations I find though that I go in to make a donation to their website and the lowest level is $25 or $10. Don't forget that, it's really important to honor those donations because $5 might be a lot for a family right now. The last one that I'll share is institutional funders. So I'll share with you on the next slide a couple of things that we're seeing in the landscape, but be a super sleuth of philanthropy. Sign up this year for Inside Philanthropy, Chronicle of Philanthropy, get the newsletters from the East Bay Community Foundation and the Chicago Women's Fund and the Boston Foundation. Get all those newsletters and watch how money is moving and how these bigger institutional funders are making decisions. If it's not already in your calendar, go in right now and on Mondays from 9 to 9:15, just block off 15 minutes for yourself to review and research what's happening in the national philanthropic landscape. Because the other thing that we saw during the pandemic that we also saw during Hurricane Sandy and coming out of the end of the recession in like 2011, 2012 was that big institutional funders started just funding random organizations because they wanted to stick to their mandate of giving away a certain allocation, and they gave beyond their geography and to intersectional issues. So again, organizations who for years had supported gender justice work gave for the first time to economic justice projects. Organizations that had given to direct service and basic needs, say like food security and housing, for the first time were giving to youth programs to support, um, you know, kids coming out of foster care in a more holistic way. So don't, please pay attention to what's happening in more regional and national philanthropy. I think it's really important in this landscape. And then the last thing is, think about new creative ways for us to watch the market, for you as you watch that market and you see, in the news and in your local community, what people are doing and giving to and buying. Like, really watch consumer behavior, what people are and aren't purchasing, what they're going to and what they're not going to. Be really aware of how people are behaving in general right now and parallel it to your fundraising mechanisms. So I will say that many of my friends have become, I think, much more athletic or are doing more physical things out in nature, given the landscape. Again, we're all stressed out. We're going for lots of beach walks and runs and hiking mountains and riding our bikes very aggressively down the road to cope with the times. So don't be afraid to put out some swag. Like, put out some tanks for people to go do road races in or to go to the gym wearing, or put out things for people's bicycles, or pay attention to what people are actually doing in the area. Um, and then maybe think about some opening an online store around that, or doing something on a bonfire type platform where, again, you can just get some accrual costs from that. Also, in the consulting landscape, we've had a lot of colleagues who have finally just kind of written the curriculum behind what they do, or they put out guidebooks or handbooks around elements of their sort of secret sauce theory of change of their organization. And they're either having other organizations that are picking that up and purchasing it, or they've also been sharing it as like open source. Or they've not open source, they've been sharing it openly, just through some digital marketing or different community-based partnerships. So don't forget about the power of also potentially launching like a curriculum, some consulting services, putting out a workshop in the community. Think about the other ways that you could potentially generate some revenue. If you have skill-based volunteers as well, ask them to do workshops or to do some pro bono consulting, with a suggested donation in mind. We had an attorney, for a nonprofit that I worked with in New York, who did a series of workshops for other attorneys, and they were able to charge like $2,500 a person who came to her workshop, because of her professional background in law. So just think about that. Think about how you're leveraging your skill-based volunteers, and if they're willing to do a free workshop or something like that, that could also be revenue generating for you this year. And then we talk a lot about donor advised funds. And I'm going to turn to Sarah in a second because I think, Sarah, you have some of the freshest examples of that from our work there. But I think it's really important that you start to understand the donor advised fund landscape, because, there's only so many foundational funders that are out there. Corporate giving is going to be down. And unfortunately, while I want to honor the smaller financial amounts that we can have still come in from other folks, in the $5 to $25 range, it's really hard to fund $1 million budget on $5 gifts. And so while you're building that base, or while you're stewarding that base, I think it's really important that you understand who in the community has access to those donor advised funds. And we've actually been seeing a lot of folks who have been getting, I don't know, Sarah, if you want to share a couple of stories, who've been finding some creative ways to access those funds in their community around their issue.
Yes, absolutely. Over the last year, Wright Collective with Alyssa's guidance has really helped us to focus on how we help organizations like yours that are small to mid-size really access those funds. It's always been sort of a mystery. And we see that it sort of happens in two buckets. The first bucket is finding some advocates that can go be your advocates, because there are a lot of gatekeepers around the donor advised funds. So who are the financial advisors that will be your friends, and that once they get to know their clients and their clients' deep inner passions, they can say, hey, do you know this organization that works with animals? Or have you ever heard of this organization that works with seniors? Because maybe now that we've put all this money in your donor advised funds, you want to consider giving to them. And so really broadening out your advocates into the world of financial advisors, not just philanthropic advisors, but financial advisors. And the second bucket that we find is really helpful is even as Alyssa said, knowing your community foundations, showing up at their events, reading their newsletters, and getting to know their program managers, even if they give you a donation every year out of their general fund, getting to know their program managers and those that work with the donor advised funds that can bring your project to their clients is really, really important. So again, it's really building these relationships, but we found, sometimes that our clients, and I mean this with love, but ignore the financial advisors because they're like, well, what's a financial advisor going to do for me? But if they're on your board, and asking all of your board members, who's your financial advisor? Have you taken our materials and sat down with them and said, hey, I'm on the board of this organization. In case you have any clients that might be interested in our mission, please let them know about us. What we find is that some of them will say, that's not my job. I don't do that. And so that's fine. Let them go. The ones that are really good, they become advocates for you. And so, honor them, send them a t-shirt, thank them, make sure that they become part of your greater ecosystem.
Yeah, and I will say I so appreciate what you're saying, Sarah, too, because as we've been here, I'll share the next slide. As we've been kind of, I think, exploring these new spaces and having to get creative, remember those relationships also outlive and outlast this moment. So this is a moment to bring some urgency because there is urgency. There are some things that are on fire right now, right? And so you can bring them now versus, maybe a year or two ago when there wasn't the same urgency around your particular mission or the concern for the population that you serve. So I think that there is also to another reason, even if you've gotten a no in the past because they're like, oh, that's not something that we do, or our entity has laws around, has policies around it. It's an opportunity to say, hey, donor advised funds, charitable trusts, you set up these mechanisms to be tools to serve community. Now's the time to serve community, right? So just think about that right now. And again, I'm also lovingly assertive as much as I am lovingly annoying. And so I think it's really important that you do show up in those conversations right now and let people know that it's time to make it rain. So just a couple examples here from client work. Federal Way Birth Center out in Seattle. They're the first Black-led owned and operated birth center in Washington State. They launched an online store right before Mother's Day and are selling swag for the holiday to mamas and babies. And we also have another partner in that ecosystem, Every Mother Counts, that actually came up with, I think, like 20 or 30 partnerships with different vendors, and they're all throughout their sales pipelines doing a portion of the proceeds back to the organization. So don't forget the power of selling some of that stuff. Again, it might only be, say you only do two, three, $4,000 in sales, but you get 100 new names of people who bought items from you, and those emails can then be cultivated further into your development effort. Um, one of our other clients launched a curriculum that they originally were kind of piloting in one specific school program, but now they're looking at piloting it in other school programs in the early childhood space. And so they've been talking to other early childhood entities about licensing their curriculum or having them come in and facilitate it. So again, that's a different revenue stream that doesn't rely on grant funding or individual donors to offset the cost. The school systems or the entities would pay for them to facilitate that. And then the other thing, which is why I say follow national philanthropy and trends. So the Mellon Foundation announced in April that it's going to be supplying 15 million in emergency funding to humanities councils. So watch how money moves, right? If there's a way for you to have a partnership with the local humanities council, go and do it now because they're all getting big chunks of money from this national institutional funder to scale up their programs or to address some of their federal funding cuts. They might be looking for partnerships into the coming weeks and months as they also recalibrate their programs or look for efficiencies. Sometimes organizations have come to me and said, it was really hard for us to actually take on the $1 million gift and the way that we took it on, or we had already lost staff or scaled back our staff. Now we need to rehire. You don't know what partnerships might be possible. So if you do see these big 6 and 7 figure gifts in the news or popping around your community, don't be afraid to approach those entities and ask them if they're looking for partners or if there are ways for you to partner with them. One of our clients has a partnership with Harvard right now, with one of the schools at Harvard, and they jointly approached a funder together to get some of that grant funding for the larger program, because both entities had lost federal dollars to keep it running. So again, I think there's a lot of power in partnerships and watching how money moves. All right. So become a super sleuth. Pay attention to where money is being made in your community, right? Again, I think this is a time where a lot of people are, construction companies, architect firms, even, plumbers, electricians, like some of those trade jobs, they're all very busy this time of year. And while they will be impacted by some of the tariffs and some of the things that are coming down the line, don't be afraid to also ask them. I was actually approached by a local landscaping company after the workshop I facilitated a few weeks ago. And they said, hey, you know what? Like, we made a lot of money the last couple of years, and we were just, we've been thinking more about some kind of employee giving mechanism, and maybe now is the time to do it. A lot of our employees are concerned about elderly parents, or grandparents, and some of their, family members that live in more rural areas and don't have access to health care. So again, don't be afraid to ask as you're sort of watching where money is being made in your community, or in some of the ecosystems and communities where your board members or your current donors are active. So get clear on your message. Update your donor page so it's easy for me to know if I give you $5 or 5 million, what difference it makes. Maybe not 5 million. You can pick a slightly more modest number based on your budget, but make it really clear and obvious that I know the difference that it makes for me right now to give you a smaller gift or to give you a more significant gift. Please spend time with donors. If you leave this call at 1 o'clock and you have 5 minutes before your next call, like book a call with a donor or a partner or another nonprofit. Like, now is the time for us to collaborate. If you're thinking about going after a big Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant for the first time, and you're going to apply for $500,000, but applying with another entity for 2 million might make it a more attractive grant application, do the thing, right? So get together in community and try to look for those opportunities as the year goes on. Don't be afraid to say what you need to say. Thought leadership, op-eds, articles. Um, get the message out there about what people are facing and what's needed right now. I think that's important for building your community as much as it is also too for leveraging it as a fundraising tool. Being able to share an op-ed in a newsletter and invite people to give shows how relevant and up to date you are, and involved in making sure that your community is taken care of. And then lastly, sign up for Inside Philanthropy, the Chronicle of Philanthropy. There's a couple other platforms we also suggest, to see where money is moving and how funders are responding. And I will also say here, make sure that you're in a good relationship with your local community foundation, chamber of commerce, things like that, as you go into the coming weeks and months. We discounted the DAF program given the current landscape. So if anyone wants to join it, we're signing folks on to begin for the summer months. It's about a 2 or 3 month program, depending on how many folks sign up. We're happy to share more about that with you in terms of helping you research the landscape and connect to some of those DAF gatekeepers and DAF funds that are public that Sarah described earlier. So just let us know. And then, yeah, be in touch if there's anything else we can serve you and support you with during this time. I hope this was a helpful and meaningful hour of lunchtime or breakfast or wherever you are in the time zones of the world. But I'm happy to open it up to questions. And Sarah, did we have any come in the chat?
Not yet, just a lot of kudos and thank yous. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to jump on and vocally give ask a question or give a comment about what they're seeing in the marketplace. I mean, what we're learning as we're going through this, like we did at COVID, during COVID, we're learning as we're going. So if there's anyone that's got an anecdote, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure, I'll jump in.
Thanks, Susan.
I think, I just want to sort of echo what you were saying about financial advisors and professionals. I don't know that I paid enough attention previously. And then, as Alyssa and Sarah know, I have someone on my board who's been phenomenal, who is a financial advisor, who hosted one of those small dinners for us, and we did really well. Um, but then, something totally different happened, and it had nothing to do with him. But I've sort of launched this corporate volunteer program, and we've asked for people to actually start paying for this experience, and it's $500, but some of it's, we got one for 1,500 yesterday, and it was awesome. But there's one program we said, it was like an interview process, and it took a while to get through the stages because they were working for a client, and then finally they accepted us, our little nonprofit. And it's actually for AFP, the AFP conference, which I thought was Association of Fundraising Professionals, but it's not. It's the Association of Finance.
Financial planners. Yeah, get it, Susan. That is awesome.
So they're going to have our logo everywhere. It's like 2,000 people, and it's at the Heinz Convention Center in Boston. And so, I mean, there's no, there's no
Love that.
commitment to a financial, any kind of chunk of change at this point, but it's exposure, and it's great. So I was pretty excited about that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. QR code the hell out of that event, like everywhere.
Yeah, no kidding. I know. They're like, well, would you mind? Can we come by? Will you come by? And I'm like, yes, 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 and
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, I love that. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Susan. That's
Yeah.
a good reminder too for folks that like, if you do have a board member who can give a, $1,000 donation for you to sponsor something in this space, sponsor a different event this year. Get in front of the realtors, the financial advisors, the business, like get in front of different audiences. And I always ask board members if you can make a gift to something like that to offset it. If it's not already in the budget, that is actually really good exposure. And you can have a table at it and talk about your work.
Yep.
Love it. Terry, so good to see you. You have a question?
Yes, a statement and a question. It's awesome seeing you. You're phenomenal. Um, the other thing we've been doing is making it more intimate and personal and meaningful. People don't care how much you do until they know how much you care. I know that sounds like a cliche, but that's very valid right now. Alyssa put us down an amazing road of really having community-centered philanthropy out here in good old Western Massachusetts. She's done some amazing things for us, including a comedy show that was something referred by Alyssa, and we raised $3,000 that day. And it was one of the things that stuck out to me. And I'm going to ask you how we circle this. She's like, make the giving personal, make it about the donor, make it about the partnership and the impact. And that is like really a secret sauce as we move. I'm trying to stay away from galas. We did an intimate dinner instead of a gala. So in this environment, what are your thoughts behind what I've done with some partners? Is said, as we align with you in partnership, um, it'd be great for you to amplify the message as it aligns with your mission. And we're able to like really have them re-amplify. Do you have anything additional you think I should be doing in that partnership building, relationship building conversation? And about our structure. Does $5 make sense to start doing? Because I love that idea of the $5. Never thought of it until you brought it up.
I mean, I think that, again, I think that you're so stellar at building relationship culture anyway, like, that work well. I think that one of the biggest things, Terry, if you're looking at those partnerships and for anybody who's trying to do some partnership development in this is to try to have the meaningful, like, I don't know, we've been doing a lot of phone calls and text to give or text to just touch base kind of things. And because your organization is so good at resourcing people to be well in the world and to find justice and fairness, like you could put out resources around like, well-being this summer. We're just calling to let you know if you head to our website, we put up a page with 5 ways to, you know,
combat stress this summer, and it's our gift to you, and hope to see you at the fall comedy show. Like, I wonder if you could resource people in this landscape too and kind of give that heart capital back and then do the campaign for their financial capital.
You are amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I like those resource sheets. I'm a big fan of those. We've been doing a lot of those with clients. Like, give a little bit of heart, spiritual, intellectual, however your organization defines it, back to your donors this year because they're also stressed out and trying to navigate these times. All right. Other questions? We can stay on for about 5 or 10 more minutes. I want to honor if folks need to leave, but I'm happy to stay for questions. Feel free to
There's
unmute.
nothing else in the chat. Does anyone else want to step forward and ask a question or make a comment?
All right. Well, thank you all.
Harry has another question.
One
Oh, go
quick
ahead.
question. When is the last time to, because my executive director is away. When is the last date to register for that class that I forgot to take the picture of the QR code?
Oh,
Oh, you mean the DAF program?
Yes.
It's open anytime. You can take
Yeah,
it at
it's
any
ongoing.
time.
Yep.
I can send
Okay.
it to you, Harry. I'll send
You
it.
rock socks. Thank you, Sarah.
You bet. Thank you all so much for being here, and stay the course, be in touch, build community, find community, and we're here if you have any questions. But yeah, good luck.
Hey, Alyssa, before you sign off, hey, sweetie,
Oh,
say,
hey.
hey, say something about, so they're newsletters, but Chronicle of Philanthropy is,
Yep.
is always, hustling their trainings.
Yep.
And let's make it less personal. A lot of the platforms that you're saying we should stay in touch with have paid trainings. My
Yep.
attitude is always like, I'll wait till Alyssa is doing her, like they're community based, and it's part of your philosophy, and
Yep.
jump on there. And I'm always like, and part of me is almost allergic to the idea of a philanthropic foundation charging people to sort of share some of their advice and trade secrets. But it's a longer conversation. Just any thoughts about, like, are those trainings, is this a time when we should double down? Like, in other words, it's going to be a tougher environment out there. Should we double down and take some of those courses and workshops? Or do you feel like there's as
Yeah.
much stuff that most of that material you can get for free? So it might be convenient for people, or some people may feel like if they're not paying for it, they're not getting something of value.
Yeah, no, Jonathan, it's such a good question and really good to hear your voice. So two things. So one is I would say don't sign up for the trainings and workshops unless it's content that you feel like is relevant to what you're specifically working on. And I think, but what I'm suggesting is following the publications that come out. So
Yeah, that I got.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
what I would sign up for. And then I would also say stay more community based. Like, you have to streamline your time in this and be super strategic, right? So going to a national workshop where you're going to hear from some big institutional funders or consultants from, you know, I don't know, like some bigger firms or whatever right now, while you might want the knowledge and the plans that they're sharing, it's about connection right now if you want to actually get like cash money in the door ASAP. So if you're applying for a Robert Wood Johnson grant and you see them doing a training, maybe pay the $99 to go, because you'll get to follow up on LinkedIn with that program officer and be like, "What's up, Sarah? I heard you last week at the webinar with
That
Chronicle."
Zoom webinar you gave, right?
Yeah, so you can do that kind of thing if it's intentional to get a relationship, build a relationship. But what I would say is I would stick to more community-based forums, or I would stick to like ones surrounding your existing funding sources. So like some of the United Ways,
Right,
Chamber of
the
Commerce,
Community Foundation, right?
yeah,
Gotcha.
all those people. Yeah,
Gotcha.
totally. And
Thank you. Good
I,
answer. Yeah,
yeah,
good.
no, I was just gonna say, also follow the funding groups. So like for folks in the early childhood space, there's a national group called the Early Childhood Funders Group. Sign up for their free newsletter and just see when and where the early childhood funders are convening. There's a Environmental Association of Grant Makers. Sign up for it. Sometimes I think we don't go sign up for the free newsletters because we're not funders, but we should know what those funders are doing, where they're hanging out. Because to Susan's point, you could sponsor their gathering in Boston if your nonprofit's based in Cambridge. Why not? Right? So I think there are
gentle and loving ways to assert yourselves in those philanthropic ecosystems that give brand awareness. But yeah, I'd be mindful of what you pay for trainings this year. Just do things that get you a connection.
That's very helpful.
Or cushion
Bye,
up.
Terry. Okay.
So
Barbara,
wonderful to see your face, of
I know.
course.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's good that Alyssa's bringing us together from.
Yes, keep doing your
Let's
amazing
grab a cup
work.
of tea while we're doing it, and we can say that we, like make it like, oh, I saw Terry. Yeah, we got together with 70 of our closest friends. Thank
I
you,
would
Alyssa,
love
for
that.
hosting this.
welcome. Yeah, good to see
Appreciate
you.
it.
You're awesome.
Barbara, I saw your question in the chat about finding the funder newsletters. We can send out the links to Inside Philanthropy and the Chronicle and the follow-up to this, so you can have that.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you, Jonathan. Are there other questions in the group?
One last one. Conferences. I'm cautious about, just like Jonathan was saying, cautious about spending conference dollars. And I know that sounds maybe a little silly because there's upskilling, but I'd rather spend upskilling with Wright's Collective or something like that than spending conference dollars for all the travel that we do sometimes that may not necessarily be in the budget.
So I would look, Terry, at who's specifically there and presenting and go with like, I always look at conferences and say, what are my three desired outcomes? And is it worth it to pay this to get those three things? Two are usually super tactical, and then one is like my feel good. Like I just want to see some of my people, and I really want to eat the tacos from that new food truck because like I'm eating cold mac and cheese these days because of my humans, small humans.
Yes.
So sometimes I just want like a good meal. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, but anyway, I would definitely think about that. And then what I would also say, which I don't, again, I think is the way that we call board members and donors into this process, is that going to a conference, if you're worried about a fee that I would say is less than $500, hopefully there's a board member who could cover that, or there's a donor that you could add that to their um, I worked really intentionally the last board I was on to create a culture of we are the pop-up philanthropy team. If you see an opportunity to take out an ad, do a small dinner, host an open house, you need somebody to buy pizza, you want to go to a conference next week and it's, $299. Like if you need someone on the board to fund that, I bring it to the board and try to get somebody to fund it. So just if that's, that pop-up giving culture can be really helpful in these times because then you don't have to worry about all of a sudden losing $2,000 in your budget when it could be a couple board members throwing a couple $100 at things ongoing so you can get the connections in the room.
They're phenomenal. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Other questions? Thoughts? I see Carrie's here and Molly, Heather, Cindy. Any other
I had a
questions?
brilliant idea and I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't know if you sent it through. All right, thank you all. I see some people signing off. So if you're going to head out for the afternoon, thanks for being here with us. And again, I'm happy to stay on if there's further questions.
I was saying, why don't you host one of these conferences and bring in the people you want us to hear, and we can give the money to the Wright Collective, and we can gather. You have an ocean where you are. You're pretty close to a major highway, and it's a cheap state to visit, and you'd get most of the people on this call and the other ones to come in person. Yeah.
All right, maybe we're gonna start the Seacoast Family Philanthropy Conference
Yeah.
thing.
I'd come from Boston.
Oh my God, I love
I
you.
drive from Winston, Mass in Springfield in a heartbeat.
I'd come from Kathmandu, but I'll just drive with Terry since we're both like we could just meet at the
We just have to
we could meet at the Circle in Greenfield and take one car.
just make sure that we make it and don't goof off.
Fair enough.
No, I think it's very necessary for folks in the
No,
development space to goof off
you
this.
don't have, you don't have to do it every year, but maybe every other or something, do something in person.
There
It
you go.
might be a lot of work for you guys and not a lot of bang for your buck or something, but just a thought.
That's true. Very true.
All right. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Talk to you soon.
Thank
Bye,
you for
Terry.
being here. Yeah, we'll send out the
Thanks,
recording.
Susan.
Good to see you. Bye,
Thanks,
Terry.
everyone.